welcome to the Drexel interview. I'm your host, Paula Morantz-Cohen, speaking to you from the university's Picture Gallery. Today our guests are the award-winning architects Kieran and James Timberlake, who together form the architectural firm Kieran Timberlake, located here in Philadelphia. Founded in 1984, the firm has been involved in a wide range of projects that include private residences, arts and civic structures, and perhaps most notably, educational institutions. Kieran, James Timberlake, welcome to the Drexel interview.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very happy to be here.
Well, I want to talk first about different levels of exchange that goes on between architects and their environments and their clients. But I guess, first of all, I want to talk about the exchange that must go on between the two of you. You formed your partnership in 1984, and unlike, I would imagine, a law partnership, a medical partnership where people can go off and do their thing, as architects, you have to share a vision or at least have a complementary vision. Tell me about this. How did you find each other? How do you work together?
Well, we met in graduate school originally at the University of Pennsylvania and knew each other there, and then got to know each other better working together. Our first jobs were with one of your prior interview couples, Bob Venturi and Denise Scott Brown, and we got to know each other better there. And we moved from that to some moonlighting, and eventually turned the moonlighting into daylighting when we were able to get some small projects, and we began in that way. And we did begin with a plan for how to go forward and the types of work we wanted to do. We began with a long-term vision. We began with a lot of dialogue about what we would be and what we would become, and how we would get there. So there was a lot of dialogue at the outset, and there's been a lot of dialogue since. And
A considerable amount, matter of fact. I think in part, there's a communication style that develops because you share common culture. And I think the common culture, comes out of common experiences. We both had Rome Prizes, courtesy of Bob Venturi and Denise Scott Brown, I think.
You both had
what? Rome Prizes to the American Academy in Rome.
Okay, and what does that exactly mean?
It's commonly called the Prix de Rome, which it's not, but it's to the American Academy in Rome, which is how would you describe it? It's an academy of fellows that encompass the arts and writing and music, including architecture, sculpture, landscape, architecture.
And you were there at the same time in Rome?
No, we were at different times.
Two different years. But it was certainly a shared culture.
Yeah.
It's kind of a Noah's Ark of the arts and literature, and we're two of everything, two sculptors, two painters, two architects, sharing a common place, Rome, sharing a common culture, the American Academy, and learning from each other and learning from the place.
So very interdisciplinary,
yes,
but also European environment. Yes. I suppose.
Well, an American environment in a European culture.
Okay, so everyone there was American, but you were there in Italy, so it must have been in Rome of all places.
Exactly, and those common experiences, I think, graduate school is a common experience. Venturi and Scott Brown's office is a common experience. Going all the way back to little obscure known things like his father being a car dealer and my grandfather being a car dealer, I think all form those common experiences that offer us a communication that, an ability to communicate with one another that's quite uncommon.
Yeah, and I get the sense that you've evolved together since you were...
we don't talk anymore now.
You don't need to talk anymore. Well, I want to go to the next level and talk then about your partnership with your clients, because that seems to be very central to your philosophy. And I noticed that on your website you talk about the importance of listening, compromising, exchanging with clients. Now, on some level that seems to be obvious, that that's what an architect should do. but I assume that that's not always what architects do.
We believe we're probably somewhat unique. It's difficult to know for sure when you sit where we do. We really only know in detail what we do, but we have reason to believe it's somewhat unusual. We believe in a collective intelligence rather than a singular intelligence. We don't think the architect has any complete right to the creativity in a project, and that the best and most seminal buildings in the world have always been made not just with an architect in spite of a client, but with an architect because of a client. And
because of an inspired client.
Yeah.
Now that said, I think, we work really hard at this, and it's part of the culture of the office as well, that we encourage and try to inculcate, our staff into that communicative culture. If you're not drawing the client out, if the client's not forthcoming, you have to draw the client out. So it's something we work at very, very distinctly to keep that communication flowing.
And I guess helping the client to figure out what it is the client wants. I mean, sometimes perhaps the client doesn't even know exactly, but you have to sort of tap into who they are. Or
it's figured out in a dialogue between them. We don't necessarily know what they need or want at the outset, and they don't either. So the initiation of a project, I think, helps us both come to an understanding of that, what they need and want, and our capacity to understand it really is the thrust of the initial dialogue.
I think it's also an embrace everything point of view. If you go into a conversation with someone assuming that half the conversation isn't valid, then you're missing a lot of opportunities. And so going into that conversation assuming that everything is valid and discerning with that conversant, what is valid is a much, more rich, experience, and leads to rich results.
And it's actually deepened and broadened over time as well. I think one aspect of programming now is, for us, developing the environmental agenda and program for a building, and that's a central part of actually reaching a consensus about, where a building ultimately needs to evolve and a direction needs to evolve in. Understanding what the opportunities are. So we begin a lot of projects with various forms of research. There's sometimes research into the client's needs and the history of those. In addition to that, it can be research into environmental opportunities that a particular place and set of circumstances.
The landscape, the materials, and so forth.
Exactly. So we try to do our homework and do research and present research to clients so that all of us are making informed judgments about opportunities.
I think also oftentimes, clients come to architects for ideas. Most of the time they come to architects for ideas. And oftentimes a client might have one or a couple of ideas, but they expect the architect to have 1,000 ideas over that same sort of set of topics. And I think one of the things that distinguishes us often is we embrace the idea that there can be 1,000 ways to have a solution to something that somebody wants to do, that it isn't just one or two, and that you get all of a sudden find yourself in this sort of, well, this is the only way to do it.
I want to move on to another facet of this notion of exchange that I think actually grows out of what you're talking about, and that's the fact that you are so willing to do renovations and additions to existing structures, which I would think could be very frustrating to some architects, because you are, in some sense, and maybe I'm using this word incorrectly, subordinating yourself to a vision that came before. And here we're going to show, you did extensive renovation at Yale College, Yale University, Pearson and Davenport residential colleges, as well as Berkeley Dining Hall. I think we have a picture of the Berkeley Dining Hall renovation, which was somewhat controversial. as well as the Yale Sculpture Gallery, which we'll talk about in a moment. But could you talk a bit about the challenges involved in doing those renovations? These are, after all, neo-Gothic structures, not Davenport and Pearson, I guess they're Georgian, but Berkeley Residential College was. So you were having to deal with another style, an older style, and yet you
well, just to frame that for a second,
yes,
I think one of the things that's, you asked the question about the doing renovations.
Yeah.
Part of doing renovations for us came purely out of necessity. You know, how does a young architect get work? And most people are not willing to entrust a young architect with a brand new building. And so how do you build confidence with that client or clients? You build confidence through showing them that you can execute ideas and their agendas, well, and extend those agendas well. And oftentimes what comes to you easily and naturally in that realm are the renovations.
So the renovations were, in a sense, the first step, although you still do renovations now that you're established architects, but in a sense that's what built the confidence in various clients.
Yeah, I mean, two thoughts about it. We have always, since we founded our firm in 1984, had an ethical set of beliefs about architecture, one of which, and a central and guiding one, has always been the environment. And if you don't take care of what you already have and take care of it well, then you really don't have the right to build new. And so we take that ethical responsibility as a very important one, and we even to this day have substantial renovations in our ongoing portfolio of work. And so we believe it's an obligation, and it's distressing to us to see lots of high-minded architects who don't ever go near a building that already exists, when in any given year we only add maybe 1% to the stock of buildings in the United States.
Are they afraid?
I think so. You know, the other wonderful discovery about this has been the opportunity it has for one as a designer, which is huge. You can have an opportunity for a discussion with a prior architect.
So it's a dialogue with the past.
Absolutely, and they're challenging, and that's the best part of it is when you get to go and work with some great architects who are no longer with us, they're in essence with their building throwing down a challenge to you.
Could you give us an example of one such dialogue that you felt where you learned something or saw something that you wouldn't have seen had you not been involved in doing that sort of renovation?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, Berkeley, the image you have up and that you're showing is a little portal, a little view of a new portal we made in a space that was once occupied by bathrooms, through which you can see the balcony of the dining hall beyond, kind of telescopically. And it's a conversation between two different histories, between a 1930s vision and a turn of the century, 2000 era vision. And it's definitely a dialogue between two architectural firms across two different times. But we think it's a dialogue. It's not a conversation working at cross purposes. It's not somebody going in and saying, you're irrelevant, that you from the 1930s no longer have relevance. And we have to believe that if James Gamble Rogers, in that case, were alive today, he would like this. He was noted as somebody who hated modern architecture. We want to believe that he would like this because we tried to have a conversation with him and learn from him.
It's simultaneous histories. So it not only extends into the future, but it allows that dialogue, to happen and embrace, that past with this overlay of a new future.
Well, speaking of that, we're going to show another photograph of the Yale Sculpture Gallery, which is